Couple of quick comments. Tony is standing by. William Henderson, good evening, Richie. You'll find good people in the grassroots of politics, but that is it. Beyond it, they are self-serving psychopaths, says William. Thank you, William. Let's welcome back to the programme a man who's been joining in, dropping in pretty much once a month for the last 10 or more years, going back way beyond that to Spain. He is a writer, he is a broadcaster, a former BBC journalist. He's been doing it for years. Bit of an authority on secret societies and the Bilderberg Group. He presents the Not the BCFM Politics Show, which is live every Friday from 5 p.m. in Bristol. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the programme Mr. Tony Gosling. Welcome back, Tony. How are you?
Thank you. I'm fine. It's mostly about power, Richie. That's my understanding of what I do. And that's what I was taught originally. You know, in fact, Paxman, when he was a regular on the BBC, he used to ask this question that you never hear anymore. And I rather liked him for that. And that is, so who's in charge? And, you know, it's all sorts of politicians and all sorts of other business people making excuses for various disasters. And this is a question we should all be asking all the time. Who's really in charge? And I don't think in our part of the world, we're really, I mean, the idea is these people are a bit like the Wizard of Oz. They hide behind the curtain. They like to stick useless idiots like Starmer out to read scripts, possibly even written by AI.
Yeah.
And so we're getting really short-changed in almost everything, whether it's the press or the politicians. Everywhere seems, or the things that are supposed to represent us, they are really, it's just a pantomime.
Dominic Cummings, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 weeks ago, whatever it was, did something that previously I don't think anybody in his position. Cummings was a bit of a spad on steroids, wasn't he? Special advisor on steroids to Johnson, right? Well, he's famous for being one of the people who was part of the league. You know, he was one of the runners. He was one of the key people running the Brexit Leave campaign. That's right.
2014, 15, 16.
Now
that was how he got his, you know, and then of course that's why Boris brought him in as chief of staff into Downing Street.
What do you think he was playing at, Tony? What do you think Cummings was playing at when he said recently that politicians don't have any power at all? It's run by the civil servants. Now, you and I know that is much closer to the truth than, well, Keir Starmer has all the power, or Nicola Sturgeon, or whatever. What was he playing at saying that, do you think?
I don't think he was playing at it. I think he was just giving you an insider's view of how things actually really work. To sort of, you know, he's a very, very difficult character. I certainly don't agree with much of what he's done in terms of, he's a sort of UK equivalent of someone like Elon Musk in a way. He's been trying to get technology and AI into government, which to my idea, you could just pick a few random people off the street, put them in charge, and they do better than the people who are now in charge. But what he's saying, I think, is that he's explaining that the civil service have a way. It's very much like Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister have a way of nowadays. It's, you know, it's not just a joke. It's absolutely real of just corralling various ministers. And if the ministers aren't behaving, then they find some sort of scandal. I mean, they have this thing called the Black Book, which is on anybody that gets anywhere near power. They've got a whole list of things that they've done in their past, skeletons they can bring out of the closet where necessary to character assassinate them in the national press.
Brilliant. We could spend a whole show on that, pal. Maybe we will in the near future.
That's the way it seems it works to me.
Yeah.
And who is really in charge? I should ask myself that and ask you that. Who is in charge? As far as I can see, it's the City of London. It's financial investors. It's people like the husband of Theresa May. You know, the sort of next of kin of the people who you see there in charge. It's Starmer's wife, people like this.
Yeah.
What about that thing with Macron's wife?
What did you make of that?
Hand right on his face. I mean, you could see the guy is being basically kicked around and bullied by that woman, and yet he just doesn't bat an eyelid and walks out with a big smile on his face.
Come here and I tell you, I know you are in a stable and long-term relationship, and I know you're a thoroughly decent guy. We all have rows now with our partners or wives, and it wouldn't be the most uncommon thing in the world for somebody to grab somebody by the shoulders or put their hand on somebody and push them away. They might have just had a Barney.
Yeah, but it looked to me very nasty. I mean, no, you look at, okay, so yes, you do have arguments and rows and things. There's absolutely no need for that to ever get physical at all.
Yeah.
And if it does, as it obviously did in that case, I mean, the thing is, you can look upon it as though they're just playing around. You can see in his face, it's not just playing around. He's not having a laugh there. He's just being like bullied, pushed around, and he's quite clearly very uncomfortable about it. And she was, I think, thinking that she wouldn't be seen and wouldn't be noticed, etc. She's hiding behind the corner, but everyone knew that it actually was her. So this is, I think, the way things work.
Why would it be significant, T? Sorry to interrupt you. If Brigitte Macron is abusive, why would that be significant to the likes of us? Why?
Well, because it means that she's able to kick around and bully around the French president. I mean, he's already extremely unpopular in France. We know what he's doing is appalling. I don't know how much you know about what happened with the Yellow Vests movement.
Yeah, we covered it on the show, yeah.
Macron appointed a whole bunch of chief police officers and prosecutors in various parts, and even military people into the police at a certain point during the whole Yellow Vest business. I think it was beginning of COVID. And they just started shooting at them. They began to... I don't think any were actually killed. They may have been, but they would do things like take their eyes out with rubber bullets, and they were deliberately trying to make anyone that turned out as a yellow vest know that they stood going straight to hospital or worse, and were going to get serious injuries if they joined the movement. This is Macron's way of dealing with the genuine uprising. You know, sort of the revolutionary French do like to come out on the streets, and that's why he dealt with it. He just basically kicked them in the teeth, kicked them in the head, and this is no way to run a country, quite obviously. They want him out. He's no good at what he's doing, and so his reaction is to bring in the bully boys.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I can buy that. Sadly, though, for the French, what is waiting in the wings won't ultimately, in my opinion, be any better. And I want to ask you about a few things. Our time usually flies by when we chat. So there's a few things I'd like to ask you about. Look, some of my listeners don't like the cut of my jib because I can be a bit sarky, right? So they're telling me that I'm very wrong to dismiss any foul play from the Liverpool title parade incident on Monday, where a car seemed to hit quite a number of people. Many of them were taken too. Yeah, we see that for sure. But there are a number of people. Some of them are the usual suspects, but also some of them are our listeners. They listen to you on Friday, and they think, Richie, this might be some other kind of play going on, some sort of staged thing. And I'm wondering, I don't see any evidence of that, or haven't seen any in any case, but let's pretend there is something wrong with it. What would be the payoff, I wonder? What do you think about it?
Look, it's quite obvious what actually happened. And
I'd have thought so,
seems obvious to me. I mean, what I did is I jumped on there literally that evening, and there's loads of people posting stuff on social media because they've been filming the whole thing. In fact, they were filming generally. Yeah. They were filming the parade, and so this incident was all the way through was caught. So the guy, what appears to have happened is followed through an ambulance in towards the crowd, and then suddenly realised, shit, this is a big like parade going on here. So he stopped his car, the ambulance went on, stayed there for a short period of time, then he tried to slowly reverse so he could get back out. No police anywhere around. And as he slowly started to reverse, there were a bunch of drunken yobbos around him that decided they were going to take the opportunity to try and get into his car, kick his car, attack his car. And I posted on my Facebook the frame just as the first person tried to actually, they did open his driver's door to get into his car. Now, this is going to panic someone, isn't it? If you're sitting in the car and someone tries to get into your car and they're kicking your car, they're attacking your car, they're shouting at you, they're obviously surrounding you, they're drunk. What are you going to do? And by the way, there were 40 injuries, not one death. He's been accused today of a deliberate attempted. Oh, it's GBH. That's right. Something like like that, GBH, I think. And as far as I know, he's just been charged, or he's about to be charged. So we ought to be a bit careful what we say. The guy's name's been released.
He has been charged, he has been charged in the last 10 minutes for, here are the charges.
Right. We're going to be a bit careful maybe about what we say.
Yeah, but he's been charged. We can talk about the charges. The charges are 2 counts of unlawful and malicious wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, 2 counts of unlawful and malicious grievous bodily harm with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Jesus, it's complicated. 1 count of dangerous driving, and then 2 more counts of attempted unlawful and malicious grievous bodily harm. So they've taken the drugs out of it. So they were talking about potentially...
Well, that was just the police putting that out as a spurious load of nonsense for the press, as they always do. Let's remember, it's the same chief constable who was in charge of the fiasco of the press relations with the Southport killings last summer, by this young kid who shouldn't have been anywhere near being out amongst the public. He was clearly a maniac. The people at school had said he was. And so this is the same chief constable handling it. The assistant chief constable has been speaking about it today, but then it's also the chief Crown prosecutor for Merseyside, or for that part of the country. They're all women, by the way. And it doesn't look to me as if any of them really know what they're doing. So this is what I would describe as accelerationism, or it could be anyway. So the idea is that you put out a complete load of nonsense, you know, as they've obviously done to begin with. Nothing to do with drugs really in the charges, so they had no evidence for that. This was just speculation they put in to feed the press monster. And then what they're doing is they're saying that the guy intended to do it. Well, he did extremely well, I think. If someone who's actually being attacked while he's in his car, going forwards and avoiding killing anybody, it seems to me he didn't intend to kill anybody or even injure anybody. He was just trying to get away from the people who were attacking him. Now, there's been very little coverage of them, no photographs of them, it seems, shared. There were about 4 or 5 of yobbos that attacked him while he was in his car. And I would ask anyone listening, if you're sitting in your car in the street with the engine running and people try and get into your car, what's your first response?
Now, come here and I tell you, hang on, are you certain that the opening of his door and piling into his car, that predated, that came before anybody being hit by the car? Are you certain of that?
Absolutely, 100%.
Right.
And I've seen the footage of it. You can see the guy in his car. He actually leans out of the car. You can see him fairly clearly. As they try and get him. But it seems to me the police haven't seen this footage. What on earth is going on? And so what they're doing is the press and the police, it seems to me, are colluding to just go along with a police story, and they don't actually bother to check these things by looking at the footage. The footage I've seen absolutely clearly shows...
I'd be very surprised if they haven't seen the footage you've seen, T. I'd be staggered.
So why are they charging him with all this intense stuff? Why haven't they arrested all the guys that were stood around the car attacking him? You know, what's going on? Anyway, so this is what I would call accelerationism. It's just deliberately rubbish policing. And I don't think that the people are in any way competent in running Merseyside police at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if the guy gets off these ridiculous charges. We'll see.
It'll be very interesting, won't it? I'll pay a bit more attention to some of that earlier footage because, if he's...
I can share that with you.
Assaulted before he drives off. Well, yeah, that would explain then why he hit the accelerator. If anyone wants to see it, it's been shared on my Facebook page. There's that freeze frame image of the people trying to get into his car. It's just some people have shared it underneath there. I had a look at it like the day after. I think it was that evening or the morning after, and it's obvious what's happened. Everyone can see it, but except the police and the mainstream press. Yeah, I could say plenty about the police at this juncture, but maybe a little, maybe a little bit later.
I shouldn't.
Yes, maybe a bit later on in the broadcast, I might say something. I wanted to ask you about 300 members of the arts, 300 actors, sportsmen and women who've come together to write a letter to Keir Starmer to say arms sales must stop now because children are being slaughtered. Is that likely? I'm not asking you now because I'm stupid or naive. I'm asking you because I've got to ask you. Is that likely to move the British government to a different position when it comes to dealing with the genocide in Gaza? What do you think?
Well, the British government will do whatever they're told by the City of London and it seems the Israel lobby. they're not really interested in listening to the press or anybody else on this. And slowly but surely, various people have been putting pressure on them over the last 18 months to do what they should have done 18 months ago. Of course, when a genocide starts, the first thing that should happen is all arms sales should be prohibited. They said they're sending arms which cannot be used against people in Gaza. How the hell do they know where they're going to be used? They don't, is the answer. And so the Israelis should be completely isolated internationally. The problem with them is that if we allow this to continue, and by the way, I found a fascinating little factoid about the extent of the Israel lobby in Europe, which is this whole business of the Spanish. A couple of weeks ago, the Spanish pulled an arms contract with the Israelis. That's, of course, how government should have done. But that's because they've got a left-wing coalition government, and one of the communist people in the coalition threatened to pull out of the coalition and collapse the government if they didn't get rid of this arms contract, which was quite a gutsy thing to do. But do you know what? Who was pushing back the whole time against this, saying, no, you can't pull this contract? It was all of the Spanish government lawyers. They're all pro-Israel. They're part of the Israel lobby. And so we have the same sort of thing going on in this country. A whole load of lawyers, civil servants, and big parts of the establishment, not least of which is the media, and I did a whole thing about this last week on my program about the extent to which the Israel, and it was low-key really that did the grift, which was pulling out these various people within the BBC, including on the BBC board, who are just working for the Israelis, and they are making sure that we don't see what we need to see in order to make these decisions, and they're creating an illusion that there's some kind of balance here between one side and the other. There isn't any balance. This is a massacre and it's a genocide. So how can you have a balance?
There's no balance.
It's like saying, we must give the Nazi SS camp Gestapo guards point of view in this story, because they have a valid case and we must listen to them. And, oh, by the way, all of the sources from within the concentration camp are very, very dodgy and we can't rely on them. So this is what they seem to be doing right now in the mainstream press with this genocide that's going on right under our noses.
Tell me what you know. I know you can be brief here because I want to move on. But no, tell me what you know about this organisation, Nasher Jew. I ask you this because I've interviewed a number of doctors. I know you have as well. And these are British Asian doctors, British Pakistani doctors. One of them is a British Palestinian doctor, Dr. Rahme, who I interviewed. She was arrested protesting against the genocide a couple of weeks ago. And I remember reading a bit about Nasher Jew. I remember you talking about it when Corbyn was under pressure. I remember you talking about it to me. I remember you doing it on your own show.
Well, I don't really know anything about Nasher Jew.
No.
I'm not sure. I mean, isn't this some sort of just Twitter account?
It's a Twitter account, yeah. They claim to be a bunch of Holocaust grandchildren, right? Whatever.
Well, they can claim anything, can't they?
Of course they can. They say they use open source intelligence to denounce people who are anti-Semites and who...
Well, it's a sort of integrity initiative, ADL, Anti-Defamation League type operation. It's a propaganda operation. The people probably get paid very, very nicely for putting out that.
But you know, the problem with it is, I was on the Twitter account of Nasher Jew. They're having enormous amounts of success and nobody outside of the likes of us, nobody's reporting on this. So investigations have been opened up all over the country into young doctors, many of them female doctors, because those doctors hate, like we hate what's going on in Gaza. And these bastards are having like proper success, like the General Medical Council, without asking any questions at all, Tony, is saying, all right then, we'll open an investigation. I mean, Christ almighty, this is horrible.
Right? These institutions are becoming, aren't they, part of the Israel, they have become part of the Israel lobby. I was just chatting to somebody earlier on today who was part of a BBC Panorama film. He was filmed for 3 hours. I'm going to hopefully have him on my show tomorrow. In an investigation into massive fraud at Lloyds Bank. Now, this, the BBC lawyer said, we're not going to be able to use any of that footage, right? So you're going to hear him on my program, hopefully tomorrow. But this is the extent to which this lobby, it's in loads of professional organisations, and it's basically a gang. It's a massive gang of genocidalists. They're generally supportive of the Israeli genocide. And so this is what I'm saying is the danger is if this is not nipped in the bud in Gaza, is these people are all over, particularly Europe and the United States, almost all over the world. What they're doing is they're getting political capital from what's been this so-called, or this not so-called genocide, the successful genocide. And they, I think, they're using it to identify individuals who are sympathetic to human rights and are anti-genocide, and getting them removed. I mean, just go back to Andrew Wakefield, for example, with the General Medical Council. He was kicked off almost straight away, but he had discovered that the evidence of a link between autism and vaccines. Now, the vaccine industry didn't like that, so they pulled a few strings, and the lobbies got him removed. So it's like a gigantic gang, Richie. I think it goes over all professions nowadays, even into education, healthcare. Many of these professional bodies are totally compromised now, so we can't rely on anything they really say. And if you want to, that's just a way to destroy someone's career, just like I was saying earlier on about character assassinating a politician. It's out there. They're quite silent about it. I would say it's probably got links to Freemasonry and secret societies and things like that as well. But it's immensely powerful. And what they're doing is they're going through our society and they're taking out the decent people one by one.
You're listening to Tony Gosling. Catch Tony tomorrow at 5 o'clock, thisweek.org.uk out of Bristol. It's an outstanding programme. Warning, you will hear things you don't agree with. It's very good, that. Very important. Come here and I tell you, YouGov did a survey. You alerted me to this. I hadn't seen it. But, because we talked earlier on about people kind of realising who's in charge and who isn't. But less than 1/3 of those who were questioned, this is amazing, less than 1/3 think any political party, including Reform now, represents working and poor people. This is astonishing. So less than 1/3 of people who are questioned actually believe that parties are working for those who need help the most. That's fairly significant, isn't it?
It's frightening, and it shows the democracy is just about on its knees, doesn't it? I mean, the idea is that the majority should, I mean, that's what democracy means. It's Greek. It just means the people rule. So the idea is that the government is there to do whatever the people wish to see happen. And it's not happened. It's been occupied. So I think most of us understand and know that. The question is with the YouGov poll is Reform. I mean, I don't know if you saw Farage's speech on Tuesday.
I did.
Reform are extremely professional in the way that they, first of all,
Very
the thing
slick.
they do as a party, which I don't see any other parties doing anything like this, is where they have their little regional get-togethers before the local elections this year, sort of March, February time. They would say you can come along, you've got to pay £5 to come through the door, but you can also get a cheap annual membership if you do that. And what they've done is they've built up the massive support just by having a simple online joining system and doing face-to-face regional get-togethers over the period of a few months early this year. And they're now up to, I think it's 250,000 members. The Tory party don't dare say what their membership number is because it's been falling off the cliff, of course. And not only that, on Tuesday, as a journalist and someone who has an eye on PR, I was so impressed with Farage saying we're going to get rid of the 2-child benefit cap. We're going to get rid of the winter, restore the winter fuel. This is exactly the sort of thing that, of course, both the parties should do. So it really kind of bolsters what I was saying earlier about the City of London being in charge of all the political parties now.
Yeah, but Farage can say this. Hang on. Farage can make these ridiculous pledges that he has no intention of honouring because, let me finish. Hang on, let me finish. Because we are 4 years away from the next general election cycle. Farage can say whatever he wants.
Well, there'll be local elections in the meantime.
Well, we've just had local elections.
Well, there'll be more. They don't just happen once every 4 years.
No, of course not. But Reform, hang on, but Reform won't be in power. Reform won't be forming a government. So in 2 years' time, they can make the same pledges. But it doesn't mean that they'll amount to anything other than a hill of beans.
They're doing something very sensible, which is they're not just going for the general election. They're going for
populist bullshit power. It's populist nonsense, isn't it?
It's bullshit. You can say, look, they're just being successful at it. I'm not saying.
No, they're good. They're very slick. I'll give you that. They are very slick.
They're very, very. They know exactly what they're doing. They've completely undercut the other parties, and it's taken Starmer 48 hours plus to react to it, and he's just got some AI written speech or moronic speech he's made today, which does absolutely nothing to convince anybody. It's like I see lots of these things like a game of chess. Farage has taken the initiative, grasped the initiative and he's moving towards the Queen of the Tory party. It could be three-way chess, maybe. The Tory party king or queen are history, and the Labour Party too. So he's moving towards them. Everything they're doing is having to react to him. So that's why I'm very impressed with Reform's performance. I wouldn't necessarily say anyone can trust them, but they know exactly what they're doing, and they are actually heading for a majority government at the next general election, definitely, and a load more local authorities next spring. I think it's pretty clear. And
and I heard you clearly. So don't jump down my throat. You're impressed.
Right.
You're impressed with the slickness of the message. You don't necessarily trust it. Look, populism is on the rise everywhere, and alongside populism comes authoritarianism. There's no way that I would say to anybody who believes that if Reform forms the next government, that things are going to become less authoritarian and the shackles are going to come off and life is going to get any easier, I would point them to every populist that is that has come to power here, Brazil, and especially in North America. Populism.
Look, populism is used as an insult, as you've just used it. But at the end of the day, of course, that's what you need. You need somebody who is popular. Our political leaders
they never deliver, Tony,
popular.
once they're in power. Once they get into power, they never, ever deliver.
I think for most people looking at politics today, a bit like those voting for Trump in America last year, as they did, of course, in their many millions, is they are absolutely fed up with this kind of establishment behind the scenes. I mean, for example, we've just had an announcement today about another ceasefire proposal by Trump, which Netanyahu looks to have accepted in Gaza. It may be the guns will fall silent tonight, but that certainly wouldn't have happened under the, it's highly unlikely to have happened because there was no impetus for it at all with the deep state in charge under Biden or Kamala Harris. So, the populists we've got to have somebody who can stand up in front of a microphone and think for themselves, even if they are then subsequently boxed in, as Trump has been over Ukraine. He's realised, I think, over the last few weeks that actually it's Britain and France and the EU and the Europeans who want this war and always wanted this war. They wanted the Americans to pay for it. And he's now realising that without the Europeans on board, it's going to be difficult to stop it. And did you see, by the way, that the assassination attempt on Putin, that hardly got any mention last week.
Apart from RT,
on Tuesday.
Apart from RT, I want to read you two comments. They've articulated better than I have because I didn't expect to go down this Farage thing. I could tell you a lot about Farage. I interviewed Farage a dozen times during my Talk Radio Europe days. Farage is a hooray Henry, free market capitalist who never gave a rat's arse about the working poor and never will. Farage is a complete sellout to the TTIP type trade agreements and all the rest of that. If the working poor of this country, and I don't blame them, you've said this before and you're right, I don't blame them for looking to Farage after their own party, the Labour Party and the Socialist Workers' Party, basically gaslit them and told them they're a load of bigots and, basically drove them into the arms of Reform. But I want to read you two comments, right? Forgive me, Voicey, I've been unwell for the last couple of weeks. Colin says, I'm going to read you two and then you come back in. Reform is part of the same problem, for feck's sake. There are no political heroes. They're shysters. Just look at their funding if you want to know what they are all about. And Roy says, in my opinion, Reform is a pressure valve, telling people what they want to hear in order to convince them that the political saviour is coming over the horizon on a white horse. That's two comments. Reform.
Well, yeah, I certainly don't see Farage as a white, the saviour on a white horse. Of course I don't. But we need our political system stirring up. The Uniparty needs to be booted out one way or another. And it may be that this would encourage other parties on the left, say Galloway's party and other people like that, and Corbyn and people like this, to get their act together. But I mean, the thing is, all I'm saying is that what we need is professional people who are prepared to commit themselves to politics in a professional and organised manner thinking on their feet and taking the fight to these other parties as Farage
I don't
has done.
believe
He's shown
you.
an
I don't
example.
believe you. Hang on. I don't believe I'm hearing this shite. You told me a year ago. Hang on a sec now, my friend. You told me a year ago and I loved it. I loved it. I thought about it for 3 days after the show. You said to me, every person in this country should be entitled to a few acres of their own land, belonging to them. Owned by them, not owned by the state. And you said to me, you wouldn't really need much of a state, you said, that people could cooperate and work together for the greater good. You weren't describing communitarianism, you weren't describing communism, you were describing something blissful. Ultimately, we don't need these shysters who swear allegiance to a pedo king or a pedo-loving king and who drive money and wealth into massive corporations. We don't need them, Tony. Why do you think we should prop up or try to put better people into this system? Surely the system itself has to be torn asunder.
Well, so you're talking about a violent revolution?
No, mate, I'm talking Gandhi. I'm talking turn your back on it. Civil disobedience, don't comply with it.
Yeah, civil disobedience is definitely, I mean, that's we need to see a lot more of that. I think you're right. But, I mean, as I said right at the start, I don't think politics in any way is where it's at. It's the forces behind the politicians like Farage, who was obviously, he went straight from Dulwich College into, I think it was into a merchant bank.
Yes.
He was a commodity trader, I think, for a while. He's part of the city, you know, so these are, all I'm saying is, we must not be bamboozled into thinking that somehow Farage is terrible, Farage is worse. He's just as bad, if not, I mean, I actually prefer him in that he will stand up and talk on his feet. And most of the politicians that we've got, the Badenochs, the Starmers, without a script to read, they're absolutely hopeless. They're always shying away from these. Yeah,
he's very slick. Can I ask you a question? He's very slick. Let me ask you a question.
He will knock them out if he's put on the telly to live debate.
Quick question. I don't doubt he would. I agree with you. The guy's very slick, and he has honed his skills through, to give him his credit, through thousands of hostile interviews when he first became an MEP. And some of the interviews I did with him, he was decent enough to give me 25, 30 minutes, and I chased him and interrupted him and bullied him and talked about his free market capital leanings and all of that, and he had very thick skin. He's honed his skills, he's very good. But I want to ask you a question before we talk about something else, because I'm mindful of time. You're listening to Tony Gosling, one of the last journalists standing in the UK. Let me ask you, if Farage and Reform were in power today, would he call what's going on in Gaza a genocide and suspend weapon sales to Israel? And would he call for sanctions on Netanyahu? Be honest.
Well, I've no idea. He steers clear of that.
Would
One
not.
thing's for sure. He did say during the general election campaign that the Western NATO provoked Putin into invading Ukraine. No other politician in the country, I don't think, said that. None of the lefties. Maybe actually Galloway may have done, but this is what we need to hear. We need to have the consensus of lies punctured, and even if he doesn't serve any other purpose, which may well be the case, at least he's doing that from time to time and saying things like the Uni Party, forget it, we will restore we will get rid of the 2-child benefit cap. These basic things that people need to bring up kids and to start talking about the value of the family, because the Uni Party never does that. The Tories, Labour, they're all as one behind BlackRock and the City of London. Maybe he's connected with all that lot too. He most certainly is. But what we're getting is at least we're getting the debate widened out with someone like him around.
Fair enough. That was the last word on Nigel. You're listening to Tony Gosling. Well, somebody should get the last word. I wanted to ask you about something. We'll probably have a bit of fun here. I think you, and it's probably my fault, I think you've misunderstood my position when it comes to geoengineering and chemtrails. I've never been one to be dogmatic, to say, well, this is definitely happening, I'm certain it's happening, and I'm not going to listen to anybody else. I've never been like that. I'll tell you in a minute, because I'm going to give you the first word on it. But having looked at it closely from different angles for years, interviewed people who think it's going on.
From below.
people who agree and who don't agree and all of that. I've kind of formed my own opinion. Now, you very definitely think that the claim that spraying aerosols and heavy metals in the atmosphere, you are convinced that it is a psyop. Why do you think that?
I didn't say that at all. What I'm saying is that, I was brought up at a place called, and I worked for the first 5 years of my working life at a place called Biggin Hill Airport in Kent, which was an old World War II fighter base, which, by the way, they've just smashed down what's called a dispersal hut, which is where the pilots used to sit waiting to go for the scramble to go and attack the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain, just to stop them coming over the channel and take them out, which they did successfully in 1940. That hut was just demolished a few weeks ago by the airport, and they've just paid lawyers in order to say, yes, it's okay, and it's all fine, and bits of it are going off to America, all completely illegally. So this tells you, this is the Fourth Reich here. This is the financial empire. But I've also done meteorology courses as part of my gliding in years gone by. These, and I sent you a little film of the World War II aircraft flying at high altitude, leaving loads of vapor trails. Anyone that uses the word contrails, I immediately think this is an American, because back in the day, that was what the Americans called them. We pilots in the UK called them vapor trails. And even if you're following behind a car in the morning, you will see quite often a little dribble of water coming out the exhaust pipe. That's because in any combustion engine, including a jet engine, water is produced in there. So when that happens at high altitude, that water just comes out of the back of the jet and it forms little crystals of ice because it's freezing cold up there. And that's what vapor trails are. Now, they're everywhere. I'm sitting on the beach at Weston-super-Mare right now, and I'm looking out the window, and I can see a mixture of old vapor trails up in the sky. I can see some very new ones, because there's lots around here. We're right on the flight lanes between London and New York and Boston, so all the aircraft that go off from London in this direction pass high overhead here. And there's also a whole mixture of cirrus clouds up there too, very high altitude clouds. So that's what we're seeing, and of course it's a long way away. You can't go up there and take a little sample of it and put it under a microscope and see what's in it. I'm not saying there's no geoengineering going on. Of course there is. All sorts of chemicals being sprayed by various organisations. There's loads of hoaxing. I've seen one of the most fascinating things I ever saw was a picture of a 747 inside, with loads and loads of tanks and pipes connecting it. No passenger seats or anything like that. Just gigantic.
Yeah,
looked like,
that was a hoax, wasn't it?
Chemical tanks.
Yeah, that was a hoax. Yeah.
And this is used to move the centre of gravity around for testing. So they're just pumping water around inside the aircraft just to move the centre of gravity backwards and forwards and from side to side to see how it's going to perform when it takes off and lands and stuff. So it's a completely natural thing. It's been there since the Second World War when planes started flying at that high altitude. And also sometimes you'll see no chemtrail, no vapor trail, because of the pressure and humidity.
Atmospheric conditions.
That it just would immediately...
No, you've had a good say. Hang on. This is a debate. It isn't really, but you've had a good say. By the way, 4 weeks ago you replied to me on Facebook, and you used, I've got the comment here, it's a psyop. So I'm just telling you.
It is a psyop.
You said,
it's disinformation.
Well, hang on. I'll tell you why I'm not convinced that it's a psyop. I'm also, listen, of course, the architects of the agendas we talk about, of course they're going to put stuff into the independent media to discredit people. I get it. But I'm going to spend no more than 2 minutes explaining why I think something might very definitely be going on. There are documented atmospheric modification problems. You and I know this, right? Project Popeye was one, wasn't it, during the Vietnam War? They seeded clouds to modify the weather. That was a very important one. Project Cirrus in 1947. That was kind of early. They wanted to seed clouds with dry ice to see if they could modify hurricanes. We had Project Storm Fury. That ran for about 20 years. Again, they seeded clouds to attempt to weaken hurricanes. There was other times they sprayed stuff in the atmosphere. One time they did it in California. They spread bacteria in the air, unknown, of course, to Californian citizens on the ground.
Porton Down did that in Swanage.
They did. No, I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah.
Hang on, I didn't interrupt you. Hang on.
No, I'm just adding to
it. Sorry, you're enhancing. Sorry, you're enhancing my argument. Thank you very much. So the Chinese have been doing it. Cloud seeding programs forever. The Russians did it. They did it in Chernobyl. I could be here all day talking about this, right? The Chinese did it for the Beijing Olympics. And I interviewed a woman many years ago called Kristen Megan. Don't say anything yet. And this is quite a few years ago, in fact. I'm sure I still have the interview. And she is a former US Air Force bioenvironmental engineering technician. And she went on the record to say that during her time in service, she saw documentation suggesting that the military was involved in undisclosed aerosol spraying activities. Now, I'm the first to admit that a lot of people said that she was a bullshitter, that she was looking for attention, yada, yada, yada. But she went on the record and said this. Again, I could talk about the soil sampling done in Maui. Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, because there's a famous saying, nothing deceives like a document. If you remember Bill Cooper, I've got immense respect for the guy that predicted 9/11. He had been passed, when he was in the US Navy, a whole bunch of documents and pictures of supposed alien encounters and stuff. Now, these documents are circulated around particularly within the military and intelligence circles. That doesn't mean to say they're true. In fact, the idea is that if you decide you're going to go public about stuff, you'll think that's true, and they use it to discredit you. But luckily thank God, before he died, he rode back on it. I think it was about 7 or 8 years before he died, and said, "Sorry guys, I just got this wrong. I was reading a whole load of stuff which just was put there to deceive me." And this is the way they operate. Intelligence people aren't stupid. They want to get something under your skin, which they can later use to discredit you.
Well aware of it. Let me finish my argument. Right, that's a good point. Right, I'm open to that possibility. Of course, maybe she was bullshitting, but I don't know that she was. I'm not sure. You talked about your meteorological knowledge, and I respect it. But I've interviewed people over the years, and don't ask me to name them now, but I will put the names out later on. I'll just have to do a troll through my back shows. But these are proper meteorologists. And they said, look, the persistent grid-like trails that linger for hours are different than the traditional short-lived contrails that you talked about, water, vapour, right? The trails that spread into haze or cloud cover. So there are meteorologists, I can't even say it, who say, no, it's not natural this. There's something else going on there. And we know that people have found spikes in aluminium, in barium and strontium, in rainwater and soil, where this stuff seems to be going on. And I've interviewed some very credible people, including a guy called Bruce Douglas in Maui, who's a lovely gentleman. He's not a truther or content creator. And they were getting so blitzed by it in Hawaii that they found the levels of these heavy metals in the soil were 12 to 14 times more than before. And my final point, and then you can have 3 minutes if you want. The bastards are now talking about doing it, Tony. They're now talking about doing it as a means to dim the sun and all of that. So why wouldn't we be suspicious if they're talking about it now? So that maybe they've been testing it and doing it for some time. And that's why I'm open to it.
This dimming the sun thing is like, it's a not 9 o'clock news
insane, isn't
sketch. Well, because you've got all these solar stuff, and yet we're going to dim the sun. What are you playing at?
Madness.
You're completely insane. Look, all I'd say in general is, yes, there is all sorts of things like cloud seeding going on, geoengineering of all different sorts, not least of which is the earthquake bombs, which I believe have been used in the past to initiate earthquakes. That is to say, possibly even nuclear weapons put very, very deep underground to initiate quakes, tsunamis, and this sort of thing. So there is loads and loads of geoengineering, but your average airliner, as it's flying over the top, has got nothing to do with this. I've seen myself.
I would agree with you, Tim. I would agree with that.
To Russia. Go on.
No, sorry, Pat. Thank you for giving way. Thank you to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. I'll be 10 seconds. I love that you said that. I don't believe that the jet airliners are doing it, Tony. I think there's other aircraft up there. Look, I suspect, I have no proof of this, I suspect that there are other planes doing it. I'm not saying that the Lufthansa flight from Frankfurt to London is doing it, but I think there are other aircraft doing it. I suspect anyway. That's all I'm saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're quite possibly right. I mean, the high level vapour trail that I was watching a minute ago has now become a serious cloud, basically, as I'm seeing it up here. I think there's a lot of stuff, which is also, I mean, I don't even necessarily believe that they're going to do this, sun dimming project. So much of the news nowadays, I look at it and I think that's just designed to frighten people. That's the news story. This is the fake news guys again, up to their tricks. And they may do it, they may not do it. And there's apparently a lot of money for it. But I mean, it just seems to me these things a lot of it is designed to weaponize the mass media, the mainstream press as well, just to get people concerned. And also, of course, to feed people's natural fears. Those that try and tip people over into clinical paranoia. I mean, if you were to take what they're saying seriously on many, many levels, you could actually become suicidal, for God's sake.
Yeah, that's right.
What they're trying to do is to make people mentally ill. This is a way of destabilizing the population in just as powerful a way as destroying the family, for example. In fact, possibly not quite so. I mean, there are all sorts of ways in which chaos is being seeded. I think that's maybe the way to end this conversation about the chemtrails, is that chaos is their motive. They want people to be very unsure about everything, and therefore not to be able to make rational decisions. And this is an end in itself, an aim in itself. The idea is to destroy society on all sorts of different levels, and to destroy people's ability to make sense of the world around them is a very powerful way to do that.
Yeah, we talked about this I think we talked about this going back to my days in Spain. We talked about the concept of perma-crisis and perma-crises, where people never have a moment to catch their breath. That's something awful.
They switch off. A lot of people then switch off, like this business in Liverpool, because the police have not taken any notice of the footage that everyone that's paid attention has seen. You just think, well, what's the point in watching the news if all you're getting is this nonsense, the fake news again and again and again, and what is true and what isn't? The post-truth world, that's where they want us.
Yeah. My listeners are giving you, nicely, they're giving you some of the treatment that I get because I believe that people died at the Manchester Arena incident. I believe it, and I know two people personally who were there, and I had to deal with it. And some of my listeners don't believe me. I don't know why they think I would make something like that up, but I get a lot of abuse for just not going along with it, which is a shame, because people shouldn't be so precious. You're not getting you're not getting quite the abuse that I sometimes get, but people are a bit bewildered that you're writing off the idea that they're putting heavy metals in the
I didn't say that, did I?
I know you didn't. I know you didn't.
They are. But, so these people, I think, you've got people out there who are deliberately trying to muddy the waters. I mean, that to me, many, particularly screen names and bots, this is what they seem to do all the time. I just block them.
Just get rid of them. Michael Cohen, who is a top man in Fallowfield, he says, Richie, Ken Livingstone said years ago, if voting changed anything, the establishment would ban it. That's Michael. Nice one from Julie. EXEL has a contract in Doncaster, which used to be an airport. Tony says, Julie, I think they are doing it. Yesterday, sunny, I watched heavy chemtrails, and today a white over. But we will move on and talk about something else before we finish. Whatever Tony Gosling tells you, by the way, it's what he believes. And that's all that matters.
Well, what I say at the beginning of my show every week now is don't believe anything we say. It's the opposite of what you get on the Times and everywhere else, where they say we are the most trusted. There's some sort of Trustpilot certificate. TripAdvisor says 5 stars for the Daily Telegraph. So I say the opposite. Don't trust anything we say. If you're in any doubt about it, go and check it for yourself. The fact of the matter is, so much of the most useful and interesting stuff is buried somewhere or behind one of these firewalls. So you might read about it on RT. You're not allowed to go there and have a look at it. And so I try and make sure there are always links that people can go and double check stuff for themselves if they're in any doubt. So don't believe anything we say.
That Andrew Lawrence thing is terrible, isn't it? I mean, the fact that it's happening so often now, where people who have no stake in anything can contact a premises, a venue, and have somebody's livelihood taken out from underneath his feet just because he made a crass gag about something or other. And you and I, we witnessed this over the years, particularly around Israel and stuff, where we talked about it earlier on. But do you find yourself, I know you talk with Martin about this on the show, but just how common this is becoming, where if it's very Black Mirror-esque, it's very social credit system, where somebody says something that the mob or the herd say is unsayable, and before the chap knows it or the woman knows it, they're finding that they're basically persona non grata. I'm not exaggerating when I say, Tony, this is terrifying stuff.
Yeah, it is. And it's cancel culture. It's the sort of McCarthyite witch hunt culture. But what's happened is what we've got. I mean, if you look at leadership, okay, let's just do that for a minute. Who are our leaders? They seem to be, and I've heard this phrase, I think it was in the Telegraph, someone mentioned it years ago, and I think it's a brilliant expression, cowards and control freaks. So we have got people who are anti-human, psychopaths, and extremely nasty types. These are the control freaks, but they also have to recruit a whole bunch of pliable cowards. And this is what I would suggest is the case at the top echelons of Merseyside Police and the Crown Prosecution Service up there, are the latter type. So people who will just be easy to push around by others around them and by their advisors and that sort of thing. So that's what we've got. So in order for those people to get into those positions of power, you have to be able to identify the natural leaders, the people who are independent-minded. And this is one of the things I think is so important, that people do have an independent mind. They think for themselves. They have their own opinion. They're not borrowing or outsourcing their opinion to someone else, especially not you or me, but even more importantly, not the Daily Mirror or the BBC. And so in order to get rid of the people who do think for themselves, you have to have a system. And that's what we're talking about here, a system to remove those natural leaders from getting anywhere near to showing up the morons who have been placed in their positions. And I would consider also, with in the back of my mind, Sir Humphrey and yes, Minister in the background, that the methods for putting these idiots in charge is often through Freemasonry and secret societies. I've seen it myself. I'm sitting in Weston-super-Mare now, and if you go back a few years, you'll find that the master of the top lodge in Weston-super-Mare, Philip Judd was his name. He was not only he was the top Freemason in this part of North Somerset at the Western Masonic Hall. He was also a paedophile and a child molester and a child abuser. And it was only when his mate, who was the chief constable, got replaced that he was even prosecuted. The police had evidence against him for the best part of a decade, and they'd never done anything about it because of these secret society connections. And it was only when, I think it was Nick Gargan took over as chief constable, he said, what on earth is this sitting on the in tray here? And they prosecuted him and they jailed him. And I actually spoke to someone here in a newsagent at the time, and he said, well, that's the least of it with Judd. He said his daughter, about 15 years ago, committed suicide as well. And that was not talked about in the press at all. So these are the sorts of people. I think Masonic, I mean, you could say ultimately it's a satanic system. I think it is, through the secret societies and the oaths they swear. And if you start to look at that, as we did on our show last week briefly with David Livingstone in Canada, the Masonic rituals are bizarrely, right, many of them, including the Third Degree, the Mark Masons and the Royal Arch Masons, are all based around the rebuilding of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. So what does that tell you about the Israel lobby? Is the Israel lobby simply British Freemasonry, British Israelism? The British, it was that created the State of Israel in the first place, and they also cleared that land back in the First World War so that the British could then control it. So I think this is all connected, that the people that are killing kids in Gaza right now, that is the Israelis and the Americans and the Brits, are also in our town halls. The same mentality is in there, where it's basically just a gang, a club, and secret societies. So that's all I've got to say about that.
We've got about 30 seconds then, because I've got about 100 comments to read. So no, I do. No, I've been looking through them. Some of them are saying, yeah, maybe Tony has a point. Yeah, fair. So I'll read some of those. I've got to do that. Before we go, give us a clue as to what you'll be. I mean, you've already given us a clue, but give us the rundown. What will you be talking about tomorrow?
There's a bit of some stuff I didn't mention we've got tomorrow. Is we'll be looking at the cost of living crisis, drilling right down into it. That is to say, all stuff to do with housing, the deterioration in housing associations. But we're also looking at solutions. So the idea is, let's just have a good old look at what's been slowly changing in the social housing sector and in the housing sector, the rented housing sector, over the last decade or so, and particularly since the 2008. We've got the banksters who are now they stated about 5 or 6 years ago publicly they wanted to become the biggest landlords in the country. They wanted to buy up all these houses. And so they want to be our landlord. So the idea is that people shouldn't be, certainly should be owning their own homes, and they shouldn't be able to pass them on as inheritance. But that's one of the things we'll be looking at specifically tomorrow, is the role of housing in basically destroying Britain's ability. I mean, so for example, the ability of people to pay their rent has just disappeared, hasn't it? Because if you go to China, the rents over there are minuscule. And that's why China's successful, is because employing people in this country has become impossible, because every single person's overheads are so massive, whether it's transport, electricity, gas, and most importantly, mortgage or rent, has made it impossible for Britain to actually have any kind of economic success. And by the way, Rachel Reeves hasn't got a clue what she's doing. Not a clue.
Tomorrow at 5 p.m, thisweek.org.uk. Follow Tony Gosling on Twitter. He's on YouTube as well. And do follow him on Facebook. That was a brilliant hour, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I just plug the book just quickly? The book?
Yeah, of course, pal. Go ahead, yeah.
So I've got 2 actual books out there if people want to actually read something. And a lot of this comes down to this book I did called The Traitors of Arnhem, which is available via bilderberg.org, and you can get it for 15 quid off of eBay. The book is really making the connection between Winston Churchill's private secretary and Adolf Hitler's private secretary. They were working very closely together at the end of the war. And the Fourth Reich, which we're living with now, this financial empire, evil empire, was created directly out of this relationship that those two had. As Bormann was brought to London, he had the signatures of all of the bank accounts of all of the looted money the Nazis had taken in the Second World War. And they created a whole bunch of big transnational companies and laundered that money in the late 40s and early 50s into those companies. And the most clever, devious thing they did is they put Jewish people in as chairman of many of the companies to disguise the fact that this new transnational, multinational empire was actually founded on Nazi money.
I have the book here. You were kind enough to give it to me. It's an excellent read. Of course, I'll put links on the podcast notes a bit later on. Catch Tony at 5 tomorrow. Thanks, Tony. Look forward to next time.
Richie. God bless. You too, pal. God bless your listeners.
Have a fantastic weekend. Tony Gosling live on the Richie Allen Show for Thursday, the 29th of May, 2025.
Your voice, your opinions. The Richie Allen Show, where free speech takes the mic and no topic is off limits.